And welcome to another edition of National Hockey Now podcast. This is Jimmy Murphy, your host. I'm joined by the man from ESPN, Greg Wyshynski. Join us. Wish, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Summer has been summery. I already have a nice. So I went to the beach, and I do my best to self-apply suntan lotion without the benefit of an aerosol spray. And I got a sunburn that clearly shows the gaps in my coverage. It looks like the Oregon Trail on my back. In places where my hands apparently can't reach, but thought I could reach. So it's been a good summer already. Got off to the right start.
Nice, yeah. And like we were just saying off air, I mean, people think once that cup is hoisted, or I guess once the draft is over, we're on vacation right away. It's just not that way, you know. I mean, these days the free agency just trickles into the summer, deep into the summer, as we've seen in the past, and of course you get trades. So we're still bouncing around. There's still a lot of things going on in the NHL. You know, one thing though that wasn't exactly free agency or draft related, but I wanted to talk to you about it. It was just, you would think after I guess we could call it 2 years of COVID, because it really did affect the NHL for 2 years, and Zoom, in the Zoom world that we all became adapted to. You would think these things wouldn't happen, but the situation in Philly, where apparently somebody forgot to press their mute button and went off on a reporter asking what I thought was a very valid question. Why would a player like a Garnet Hathaway, a veteran, hasn't won a Stanley Cup, could probably be picked up by a contender? Why would he want to come to Philly? And that got picked up in the background there. For those that aren't aware, you can check it out. It's all over Twitter, with somebody apparently with the Philly social media or media relations team saying, "Oh, not this bleeping question again." I mean, for a team, I'm thinking about this team right now who's trying to rebrand themselves. They're trying to win back their fans. They're trying to win back the media there in Philly. That wasn't exactly what they needed right now, Greg.
It's not, but the context of this is also important, in the sense that the actual line was, how many times is she going to ask the same effing question? And that's part of it too. I mean, we're dealing with a media landscape where women don't often feel welcome to begin with when they walk into a press box. And now to ask, like what you said, is a pretty benign question and get smacked back by the social media team on mic was kind of underscoring the problematic nature of the whole situation. Your point about Zoom is a good one. I didn't even pick up on that. The fact that we're all pretty good at it now. Like the days of Jeffrey Toobin have passed, and we all kind of know how to handle these situations a little bit better now, except for the Flyers apparently. And so, they apologized to the reporter, but Keith Jones put out a statement, the president of the team. They reached out to the reporter and her outlet to express regret. They want to promote an environment of mutual respect, yada, yada, yada. They know it's a goof up, and I give them credit for being proactive about it. But, the rebranding and the pushing forward of the Flyers is something different, is an intriguing story to me. I mean, I'm always interested when teams kind of like pivot into a new branding. And it seems like the Flyers are really trying to kind of do this like dawn of a new era thing, but it also feels a little early. Like Chicago can do that. Like Chicago has Bedard. Like Chicago said goodbye to Taves and Kane. They have Bedard. They can go to their fans and say, "It's a whole new bag, baby. Come on board. You get in while you still can." And everybody's going to be like, "Yeah, that makes sense." The Flyers don't have that sort of northern star to lead them, like the Blackhawks do Bedard. And it seems like they're trying to sort of rebrand as a new brand of Flyers hockey and a new era of Flyers hockey, simply by virtue of having Danny Briere as the GM and Keith Jones as the president. And it kind of feels a little early, if that makes sense.
I'm with you. Well, I kind of, when I see it, I go back. I mean, they did kind of go back to those, they changed the uni a bit, went back to the style they had. And I don't know, what would that be, like the 90s, I guess, late 90s or early 90s, the Lindros days almost. And, I'm wondering, I think back, Greg, here in Boston, when the Bruins came back out of the lockout, and then it still wasn't working quite right. They did a uniform change. They did a whole rebranding, but it was almost not a rebrand. It was like a retro rebrand, so to speak. And they tried to bring back that sort of that big bad Bruins flavor, and they successfully did it. Good on them. And look where they are now. They've had a lot of success since then. I'm talking, you look back probably about the 07-08 season when Claude Julien came in. Peter Chiarelli was in his second year. And they made Cam Neely more front and center, and he had more of a role. And I kind of was expecting, and maybe they will. Maybe it is early, like you say, but I kind of was expecting the Flyers to go back to that similar era from the 70s and try and reignite that big, tough, mentality there. But I don't know. I mean, this is a different hockey generation now. This is a different league. This is a different style of play. Do you think that a team doing something like that would still sell? Would it still work now?
It would sell depending on the market, and you figure that Philly would be one of those markets. But I mean, not to try to play psychologist here, but it's not as if Keith Jones is the GM. Like Danny Briere is the GM, and would it surprise you at all to see a team that's more in the frame and philosophy of a Danny Briere than a Keith Jones or a Rick Tocchet or somebody else? It wouldn't surprise me, because that's kind of where the league is right now, So again, it's hard to really say, because they're just getting started on whatever the next phase of this team is going to be. They have so many guys in this roster they still have to make decisions on. There's constant talk about what are they going to do with a number of the guys that are still there. Carter Hart being one of them. So it's kind of hard to really get a sense of what they're trying to build there. And they've got some good players in the system. I mean, through the draft and other things too. They've got a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but not those like premium elite level prospects that other teams that are in a rebuild have.
Yeah, a good segue there. You brought up Carter Hart, and that's something I want to talk to you about. Not just Carter Hart, but the goalie market right now. And look, for weeks heading into the draft, and then even carrying over into free agency, Greg, we were kind of bombarded with how many goalies would be switching teams. There would be like musical chairs going on the goalie market, whether it's in free agency or the trade market. And then it just didn't really happen. Obviously a big one here in Boston was Linus Ullmark. I mean, I know for a fact that the Bruins had plenty of talks involving him, because they have a cap situation where they can't really carry two goalies that are making $5 or close to $5 million a year at the same time. It's not going to be possible. Right now, they're going to have to do it likely. But I was surprised that didn't happen. What do you think happened? Were people asking for too much, or were maybe people offering too little on the goalie market?
Or we just overestimated where these teams were. I mean, in the Ullmark situation, I heard the same thing you did, that there were talks, but maybe ultimately the decision was let's not create a problem that we don't currently have. I mean, Lord knows the Bruins have a number of holes to fill, could probably use that cap flexibility, but at the same time, when you go into next season, the best thing about the team is probably the goaltending at this point, right? So it's like, I could see the logic in maybe exploring the market, but then ultimately pulling him back. Hellebuyck's a weird one, because we all thought that he was going to move in that sort of Matthew Tkachuk-ian way of let's get ahead of our problem before he leaves. And Kevin Cheveldayoff at the draft was kind of singing a different tune of thinking about him and Scheifele as maybe members of the team next season in a way that kind of defied what we had all been speculating. And then the other one was UC Saros, and that was one that I think we just didn't know because of the GM change, and we're all thinking, okay, David Poyle's not there anymore. Finally, they can have a proper rebuild there, and not be a team that's just kind of like grasping and clawing and trying to get into the playoffs each year, but not being a legitimate contender. And instead, Barry Trotz went the opposite direction, where he signs Ryan O'Reilly and he signs Luke Schenn, and he's bringing in veterans to augment the veterans that are there, to all of them help out the young guys on the roster. And then obviously, if you're going to do that, you're going to keep Josi Soros around. So I think it was more of a thing of like, we went into the summer thinking the UFA market is stupid. It's like a terrible crop of goalies.
Yeah.
And if you have a problem with your goaltending, you're gonna have to figure it out in another way. And for the most part, you had a lot of big name goalies that we all thought would be available that weren't. And then the other thing that happened too, Jimmy, was, it's a copycat league, as they say. And the Vegas Golden Knights winning the cup with Adin Hill, while it's not going to be a template setter, it certainly informed some decisions. Like I spoke to Rob Blake briefly at the draft, the LA Kings GM, and there's no question that the idea of just kind of throwing three goalies at the problem and seeing if you can get one going at the right time in back of a really good team is something that I think teams are a little bit more open-minded to. That doesn't mean the Kings won't turn around and trade for somebody at the deadline like they did with Korpisalo this year. They probably will, in fact. But I think in the case of teams like the Devils or the Kings or others, their minds are a little bit more open to the idea of, all right, let's just have three guys. One of them can maybe step up at the right time, and if they're competent and we play as good as we can in front of them, we could win just like Vegas did.
Yeah, for sure. Well, just as you're talking there, I see this come across the wire on Twitter, and we're recording this on Thursday. It will go live on Friday. But the Coyotes, Greg, placing Alex Galchenyuk on unconditional waivers for purpose of terminating his contract. But interesting in this, they put the club will have no further comment at this time. Why would they throw that in at the end? That's interesting.
because they don't want to talk about it. I mean, it's obviously something they were not cognizant of when they signed him, I'm sure, and quickly rectified the problem. Again, it's Galchenyuk. He signed I think it was like a $775,000 contract, so It's not as if it's gonna kill him to buy out the deal, but it has that whiff of. I mean, I don't want to bring this up in the context of the Bruins again, but like it has the whiff of the Mitchell Miller thing of like, what didn't we know? And then all of a sudden, you make another completely different decision on the player. It's a real baffling one. I'm interested to see how that comes out.
It's a real baffling one. No, I mean, like everything that's happened for him since he got drafted. Obviously it was a tough go where he started in Montreal and being in that media situation there, and how passionate the fans are. It just didn't match, and there was a lot of stories about him, and it just seems like this guy could never, whatever his issues were, and we've heard tons of rumors, so I'm not going to sit here and try I know, but whatever they were, he seems to have never gotten over them, and they seem to have followed him wherever he's gone. I mean, I know people that work with the Colorado Eagles and worked with him there when he was in the Avs organization for the last year. And there was never a good thing that anyone had to say. It wasn't like they went out of their way to kind of insult him or really tear him apart. But it was like this. I don't really want to talk about it. Like it's a baffling thing, man. And it's sad. It's almost sad in a way because this kid was pretty hyped up when he came in the league.
He was a 30 goal scorer in 2015, 2016 at 21 years old. I mean, like he was. Yeah. He's on his way, and then after that, diminishing returns in Montreal, and then we go Arizona, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Ottawa, Toronto, Arizona again, Colorado, Arizona again, and then he gets bought out. I mean, when he was playing with the Avs last year, he's playing 7 minutes a night. I mean, it's an incredible fall from grace, and I mean he's still he's 29 years old. There's always going to be that talent. There's always probably the hope that he's turned things around off the ice, and maybe they've just discovered he hasn't.
Yeah, it's too bad. Well, let's bounce around here. One team, I was talking about this. I was on a podcast the other day, and we'll stay in that division. Or actually, no, they're in the Central. We'll go to the Pacific Division. The Edmonton Oilers are an interesting one. We talk about goalies just now, and what will their goalie situation be like? Is Skinner going to be able to replicate what he did last year, or even handle more of a workload? Will he have to handle more of a workload? What will happen with Jack Campbell? But other than that, I'm pretty satisfied with what they've got going into the season, Greg. I mean, I look at their defense, and I thought. I mean, you may disagree. I thought the best trade deadline acquisition last year was Ekholm. What he did for that team was amazing. How he changed the complexion of it, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't mind their blue line anymore. Yeah, they could lose a little improvement here and there, but I like the situation in Edmonton as they get ready for this upcoming season.
Yeah, as long as they don't play Desharnais, like I'll be all right. I don't need to see that guy on the ice any more than he needs to be. But no, I think inherently you're right. I mean, like the Ekholm trade was transformative for them, not only because of his skill set and how good he is, but also just because of what they lacked. And they lacked that guy that had been there before, that had, was the thing people always said about him in Nashville, and I think you saw it in Edmonton, is he's a steadying presence. Like, you know what you get. There's a consistency to his game that I think he really brings to the rink every night, and that's certainly, that's a team that could use some calming down in the defensive end now and again, and I think he really does that. They were my cup pick last year on the premise that the West wasn't going to be necessarily as strong as the East, and on the premise that two generational talents figure it out at some point. Kind of like what Mario and Yager did. Like, they're going to like, people forget Mario didn't win for a very long time in his career. Like, he did not win a cup for a very long time in his career. And Connor and Leon are on that sort of same trajectory, and eventually they figure it out if they can get enough goaltending and the team is deep enough. I'm with you, man. Like, I think their blue line will be better next year, if only because Ekholm's there for the whole run, and Bouchard is getting better year after year. And then up front, there's still the Leon and Connor show. I mean, the ability to have two guys in your lineup that anchor two lines, and both those lines can kill you. And then when you need to, you put them together. And then, oh, by the way, on the power play, they just menace people. I mean, it is a luxury no other team in this league has right now. And and I think I hope. And again, there's a little bit of like what's best for the game here, a little bit too. Like, I hope they go on. I hope they play for a cup, because Connor needs that spotlight, and we need Connor in that spotlight. And I'm not saying that completely unselfishly, because the ESPN does have the Stanley Cup final this year, and it'd be awesome to cover David in that series. But I just hope at some point they can get over the hurdle and really play for something meaningful, because that would be a fantastic moment for the NHL.
And I thought Connor Brown was a good addition too. I like him. I think him coming in there, and then you talk, even their bottom six was better last year. They had some better role players that could spell some relief for the top two lines, and pick up some minutes that maybe they hadn't been doing in previous years. So I like the balance they've got going there, and we'll stay in that division right now. And it's just writing about it.
But before you move on, though, like you said, though, like, they have $7.6 million committed to Campbell and Skinner. Most of that to Campbell, and that's again what it probably boils down to, is like, how is there any way Campbell can rectify his career? We've seen players have a bad first year in a market and then turn it around after that. It happened before. I mean, look at Bobrovsky down in Florida, like, under the weight of a contract, being a free agent, having those expectations, even in a market like that. It took him a while to kind of like move that weight off his shoulders and find competent play again. And so I'm not completely ready to write off Campbell, but the goaltending is really the whole ballgame with that team. If they can't find somebody who's going to at least play well enough to allow them to win a series, then they're cooked.
Yeah, and let's go. I mean, speaking of goaltending, and this one team that I'm not that confident in it, but maybe you're more confident than me. The Colorado Avalanche. And I look at them. If they can have a healthy Cale Makar, obviously they're going to be much better. They battle, just be healthy in general. I mean, that team was ravaged last year with injuries, and that's probably why the aforementioned Galchenyuk was getting some time up there. It was just, they had nobody for so many times. I mean, it just, and you look at all the goalies they went through. Now, I look at Francouz, and I don't know, is he the answer there? Can he do it? What's your take on their goaltending there?
That's a great question, and I think he's good. It's funny in Vegas, if you had asked them like which one of that collection of goalies they think could step up, potentially do what Adin Hill did last year, they would have told you it was Francouz. Like, they love the guy. I think he certainly helps, and it's going to be a tandem. And again, it's just trying to find the right hot hand to play. I was a little surprised though to see them as the wagering favorite to win the cup next season. I think they're a real good team. The Landeskog of it all gives me pause. Ryan Johansson, I think is going to be a really good acquisition for them to fill that second line center role. I think he's somebody who got a little too fat and happy in Nashville on a contract and on a team where the stakes were low. And I think, a really good spot to regain your competitive fire is when Nathan MacKinnon is always yelling at you. So I think he'll be good there. I really do. I think he's got more to offer. And they took a chance on Drouin, and they've done some other little things. I think the Ross Colton acquisition was really good for their bottom six. Same with Miles Wood, although I don't love that contract. So they're going to be really good, but prohibitive betting favorite to win the cup is again a little surprising to me. As good as they are on the back end, as deep as they could be at forward, but then you come back to that goaltending, and you're like, can one of those guys win a cup?
Yeah, you just got me thinking about something too. And for all our hockey bettors out there, or anyone that just wants to try hockey betting, I mean, the NHL seems out of any sport, they seem the preseason favorites or even the pre-playoff favorites, they seem to always be wrong. And it's almost like when they set these odds on who's going to win a cup or who's going to win a conference or who's going to win a division, it's almost on popularity. Would you not?
Yeah.
Like it's they don't really do their due diligence. And I think last year's a perfect example. I mean, who the hell would have had the Florida Panthers in the final, or who the hell would have had them beat the So I mean, that's one of the beauties of the game, that you may as well. I mean, if you're looking at just doing some futures, I mean, even if you throw down like, $25, you could turn it into 500 easily in the NHL, because it's that all over the place sometimes. So if you really do your research and you start to examine teams that maybe you're getting, not noticed, maybe is sneaking under the radar, you can do pretty well.
You certainly could. And, I was looking at the futures recently for the cup, and I was a little sad that the Devils are such a favorite. I thought they could really, I was like, I could make some dough on this team, but lo and behold, they're like the fourth or fifth choice right now. But no, you're right. I mean, I think last year was a great indication that it's about when you peak, it's about how healthy you are, and ultimately it's about, can you find a goalie that can win a series? And again, I always say this, harkening back to the days of like Chris Osgood and people like that. Like, the two greatest examples and what you need from a playoff goalie are Chris Osgood and Yevgeny Nabokov. Nabokov to me is a better goalie than Chris Osgood. He's more talented. He was better than him. He played for the Sharks for a really long time. But every playoff series the Sharks were in, he'd had that one game where he gives up the wrong goal at the wrong time, and the whole thing unravels. So as good as you are, if you have that moment of slippage behind a team that already has a fragile psyche, well, then you're not a good playoff goalie. And so Chris Osgood, on the other hand, again, a completely average regular season goalie, a guy who compiled a lot of impressive stats at the Red Wings. But then you get him into the playoffs, and it's not like he's Hasek. He's not winning series on his own, but he sure ain't losing them. And that's the real key. It's like you don't need Hellebuck, and you don't need Shesterkin. You don't need these guys necessarily to win. You need them maybe to get you to the playoffs, and they certainly can win a series on their own. But inherently, you just need someone who is not going to put your team in a disadvantageous position based on their play. And that's exactly what Vegas got with Adin Hill last year. Like, there were times when he was really good, and there were times when he was just as good as he needed to be. But he was never bad.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, look at Linus Ullmark. Look at the year he has, but then in the playoffs, he was bad.
Right.
That's the bottom line. I mean, there's nothing else you can say about it. He said it too. So it's like, I'm not going to put him down, but he was bad, And
in the Bruins case, like, wasn't he also banged up though, Ullmark, a little bit? Did he say?
Yeah, and so that's on the team as well. And that will be a debate that will last forever here in Boston. Should he have been in there as long as he was?
Well,
I'd say no.
Right, and Dallas had the same problem where Ottinger. I mean, he was banged up by the end of it, but they ran him into the ground. And it wasn't even to like make the playoffs. They ran him into the ground because they had no other options. And then he ends up getting banged up and exhausted in the most important, series of the playoffs for them. But in Ullmark's case, like, that goes back to what I was saying before, though. Like, as much as we talk about the goalies for Boston, it was health. I mean, the Bergeron thing happened. We could debate again, like you said, to the end of time about him playing in that game in Montreal. but like it doesn't change the fact he got hurt. Allmark's
Mhm.
banged up. They're dealing with some other stuff too. So it was a combination of like your goaltending didn't do it for you, but then conversely, you weren't healthy at the right time,
Yeah.
and we all saw what happened.
It was something I'm very familiar with, Greg. It's called Murphy's Law. It is very real, and it took over the Bruins. That's what happened. So, hey, listen, my friend, great having you on here. I appreciate you taking the time. I hope you do get some downtime soon. Enjoy the summer, and we'll get you on down the road. All right.
I appreciate it, man, and we'll do it again. And everybody, have a good summer. It's very quick. Make sure that you
Yep.
spend it the right way,
Exactly.
and stay safe out there, everybody.
All right. That's Greg Wyshynski from ESPN joining us. Always a pleasure. Check him out there, ESPN.com. Have a good one, Puck Daddy. All right. That was a good conversation with Greg Wyshynski of ESPN.com and ESPN NHL coverage. And we touched on the LA Kings with Puck Daddy there. And now we're going to bring on our LA Kings writer for National Hockey Now. You can find his work over at LA Hockey Now. And that's Austin Stanovich, repping the USC shirt there. There
Oh
we
yeah,
go.
alumni, alumni, baby.
Alumni. Okay, my man. There you go. There you go. Well, I'm a Notre Dame fan. I apologize, but
Well, I might have to jump off now. I don't know if I can do this.
one of my bucket lists is to see a Notre Dame USC game. I haven't even seen one at Notre Dame yet, but I'd love to see one out in Cali as well.
Oh yeah, they're great.
That must be fun. How was it going to USC? What was that like?
I loved it. I only did a year there. I got my master's there, and it was a year-long program, but it was amazing. I loved every minute of it.
Nice. Are you from the area as well?
Yep, I'm from SoCal, born and raised.
Okay, cool, man. Where did you go before USC?
Long Beach State.
Nice,
Yeah.
man. Cool. Now, what part of Cali did you grow up in? What part of SoCal?
I grew up in Long Beach.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. I don't know. You're a lot younger than me, but I saw Sublime many times back in the day. Good shows, the Long Beach guys. And then I think I saw them, their reincarnation when they were called like the Long Beach Dub All-Stars.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell they're called now. I know they're still touring. But anyhow, listen, interesting off season for the LA Kings. We were just talking about with Greg, we had brought up just overall the big picture across the NHL, how, leading into the draft and free agency, there was a lot of expectation that there was going to be a goalie carousel, so to speak, on the trade market and the free agent market, and that a lot of goalies would switch places. Now, you did see the goalie that the Kings acquired at the end of the year last year, Jonas Corposalo, head to Ottawa, and the Kings, of course, did bring in Cam Talbot, but they have been linked to some bigger names. Were you surprised they ended up settling on Cam Talbot?
Not too surprised. I think that Corposalo contract he signed in Ottawa, when you see it, I kind of get why the Kings steered clear of that. I don't think they were ready to commit that kind of term and that kind of money to Corposalo just yet. And they were linked to a guy like Hellebuck. I don't think they were ever too interested just because he's got 1 year left. And then after this year, you're signing a 30-plus goalie to a big contract. And I don't think they had any interest. And I don't know if they were too worried about going out and getting an elite superstar. I don't think they need that 2012 quick style guy to carry them to the cup anymore. I don't think they view the NHL that way anymore. I think they look at it more like Vegas, where if you build a team in front of that goalie that's going to be able to dominate play, you're going to be fine. So I wasn't too surprised that they didn't go the route of going all in for a big goalie.
Right. Right. And, it's interesting. We were just talking about that. That's kind of the philosophy, I think, going forward with a lot of teams right now. And I think obviously, seeing how the Vegas Golden Knights won it there with Adin Hill, teams are now thinking, hey, we don't have to put that much money in there. We can get kind of, if we're talking tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we can kind of make it work with a tier 2, maybe even sometimes a tier 3, because a guy can just catch fire. So it looks like that's kind of what the Kings have bought into. Now, let's get right to the big news, though, for the Kings here. And you were writing about it a lot as it led into the trade when they acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois. Before that, for weeks, you were very hard on the Kings. And I agreed with you that, okay, enough of the rebuild, enough of building these prospects up. We've gotten to that point where you got to take the next step and you got to really contend for the cup and go for it here. And, if you have to give up some really good prospects to get a guy, a top 6 center with the pedigree that Pierre-Luc Dubois has, you got to do it. And of course, they did it. So What was your take on that Pierre-Luc Dubois trade? And, do you like it? Do you don't like it? What was your take?
Yeah, no, I like it. I think that my big thing leading into that was you got to go one way or the other. They were kind of half rebuilding, half trying to win with Kopitar and Doughty, which just like your bottom six is filled out with all these first and second round picks that don't really fit the role. And then you get into the playoffs and you get bounced in 6 by Edmonton because you're asking these guys to do something they can't do. So you either need to give the keys to those young guys or move them on to get guys that can help you now. And that's what they did. And I like Rob Blake getting aggressive. We haven't seen that much from him so far as GM of the Kings. And you get a great player in Pierre-Luc Dubois. You can talk about maybe $8.5 million for 8 years is too big a contract for what he's been so far. Maybe, there's whatever questions that I don't really buy into about his off-ice thing, but undoubtedly you get the best player in that trade. Your roster is better now than it was at the end of last season, so there's not a whole lot to complain about. And the other thing I really like about it is that it doesn't change their overall plan too much. It gives you a chance to win now with Kopitar and Doughty still playing at a high level, but you're still relying on Quentin Byfield, on Brant Clark, on Arthur Kaliev to take that next step to make you that team. And now you just have more firepower if they do that and more long-term security with Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's only 25 years old and is going to be a very good player for a long time, probably through that entire 8-year contract. So you have that core built in where it could be 8-9 years of sustained success for this team because of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they didn't actually have to give up too many prospects. I mean, when you look at it, the one young guy that they had to move, I guess, to accommodate the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade was Jersey. And yeah, they probably don't like losing him. He's a good young defenseman, but at the same time, you got to give to get, and that's just the way it is in the salary cap world. So that's a great point by you, where they still kept the future of the team pretty much stable, but they also really improved the present. So that's a great move. And you look at that now up the middle. You look at their center position. They have to be one of the deepest center teams in the league.
Oh, for sure. And I like the way the team's built where you have – because Dubois in the past, the Kings like to tout him out as this superstar two-way center. He hasn't really been that his career, at least not consistently. But if you get in a situation where he's struggling with certain matchups, you have two-time Selke winner in Andrei Kopitar and a perennial Selke finalist in Phil Deneau to kind of insulate Dubois if you need to do that. We saw him do that with Fiala last year, was obviously a wing, but they would basically play him on the third line and say, Kopitar and Deneau take all the difficult matchups and let this guy feast on the third line. If they need to do that, you can do that with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I mean, if you're getting that guy out against other teams' third lines, he's gonna do some damage out there. So I think that the way they're set up, and they're big down the middle now too, which is huge. So that kind of not only the players being high quality, but the play style they have and the way they complement each other, I think is huge too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the teams that win the Stanley Cup, and I say this all the time, a lot of fans just don't want to believe it, but go back and look at the last 15 Stanley Cup winners. And I'd be right. I'm not even going to be able to list them off the top of my head right now, but I'd say 13 out of the 15, they were deep down the middle. You win by building up the middle. And I'll give an example. I'm sitting here in Boston right now, and fans were going nuts because they didn't keep Tyler Bertuzzi. And oh my gosh, you got to give him whatever he wants. No, you don't give a winger whatever you want. Teams don't win on wingers. Look at how long it took the Capitals to win with Alex Ovechkin. And that's not a knock on Ovechkin, but he's not a center. Teams don't win with their best player being a winger. It's always being strong up the middle. And the Kings have that now, and I think they're a legit contender. And look, I said this the other day on another podcast. If I'm picking my two teams in the West, unfortunately, because of the way it's set up in the playoffs, that have to meet in the second round. But I think the two best teams heading into next season in the West, in my opinion, are the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers. I like those teams a lot. I like the way they're built. The Oilers, have been for years kind of everyone laughs at their defense, but they've got a blue line all of a sudden. LA's got a good blue line. And let's talk about that blue line right now, Austin. What do you like about LA's defense heading into this season?
I love bringing back Vladislav Gavrikov. I think he came in and exceeded even all expectations they had on him, especially with his ability to kind of move the puck. And I think that top four is as solid as you're going to get in the NHL. Mikey Anderson's grown into, in my eyes, one of the top shutdown defensemen in the league. I mean, there aren't many guys that can go up against McDavid, against Elias Pettersson, against all these Pacific Division superstars and just shut them down consistently. He does that. You have Drew Doughty who's still eating up, 26, 27 minutes a night. I think they do need to bring that down, but he's still a star. He's not the Norris Trophy player he used to be, but he's still a very good number one defenseman. And Matt Roy is one of the most underrated defense in the league on that second pairing for me. He's just very good at everything, just a steady Eddie back there. And then the big wild card is going to be that third pair. They don't really know what that's going to be. It could be Brandt Clark, who is a very good young player. We don't really know what he looks like at the NHL level right now, but he could be a great player right now. He's going to be a great player, but he could be that as early as this season. It could be Jordan Spence, who they've seen have success in the NHL. And then you look at that left side, Toby Bjornfoot's a first-round pick who maybe hasn't done what you wanted to at the NHL level. I think he lacks a little bit of confidence. He can be good. They have Andreas Englund, a big body, physical, something they've missed in the past. So I think that balance they have on the back, and they have three strong pairs, certainly two very strong pairs, a top four that they can rely on for heavy, heavy minutes, and potentially a third pair that can be, a wild card in a guy like Brandt Clark or Jordan Spence, who are very good young players.
Let's talk about behind the bench, Austin, and the job that McClellan's done. What's your take on him? I mean, are you surprised that he's lasted this long there? What's your take?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised he's lasted this long there. He was always going to have a really long leash because of the situation he came into. I don't think they looked at those first 2 or 3 years with very much of a critical eye because they knew this team's, let's be frank, this team's going to stink. We're not very good. We're going to give him time to build what he builds. There are fair criticisms of him. There are a lot of fans who levy those criticisms very heavily. I don't think that he's given the Kings a reason to be worried about him behind the bench. He implements his system. He implements that really, really strict neutral zone trap, and it works, at least in the regular season. It hasn't worked in the playoffs yet. We have to see if it can be that this year, and I think this is going to be the defining year. This is the first time he has the expectation of going deep in the playoffs. And if he can't do that, that's when you have to sit down and have the conversation. Is this guy the right guy to lead us forward? In the last year of his contract, they might decide no and let him walk. So I think this is really, this is everything for him in LA. If he has another first round exit, he might be done. I could see that happening.
Right. Now you look around that division right now. We just brought up, we were talking about other teams there, Edmonton. What other teams do you see maybe pushing the Kings a little other than the Oilers, or vice versa, the Kings? What other teams are contending in your eyes in the Pacific? We're going to say the obvious, Vegas, but is it just Vegas, Edmonton, and LA right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think Seattle's still kind of that wild card. You don't really know what they're going to be. They were pretty good last year, especially when Martin Jones was hot. They looked like a real contender, and then he fell away, and they kind of fell away with him. But I think they're the big wild card there. They could be anything. I really don't know. Calgary, I don't expect to have a big bounce back. I think some people think they could be in the mix. I don't really see it. I think that locker rooms was kind of decimated by Daryl Sutter. We've seen it happen in LA, and it takes some time to recover from that. It just is what it is. Vancouver, their roster looks fine, but they just can't get it together. And I'm not putting my money in Vancouver. I think people have done that before, and it backfires on them. They just can't figure it out over there. And then obviously Anaheim and San Jose, they're off in their own world rebuilding, trying to hunt for top picks. So I really do think it's just Vegas, Edmonton, LA battling for that top spot.
Yeah. Calgary's, I didn't even think of Calgary. That's an interesting one, man. Their
roster still looks good.
Yeah. And you wonder, will things change with the new coach, new GM? Does the vibe change around that team? I'm just wondering, the biggest mystery to me is what the hell happened to Markstrom?
Yep.
That I think was one of the biggest mysteries in NHL, man. He just went whoop right off that cliff. Can he bounce back? We know how mental a position goaltending is. Is he in the wrong place mentally? He's obviously got the skill, but can he bounce back mentally? So that's the wild card right there, I think.
Yeah.
I almost feel like Seattle takes a step back, to be honest. I think that they kind of caught lightning in a bottle there. And I think they kind of go back. And you notice too, I've been following the whole Erik Karlsson trade thing here, and I'm so surprised. I heard Seattle being in on it, but I guess, Francis pulled out of that early. And I think that's why. I think he knows that his team, they're not ready to be this contender right now. They're still building. They want to just keep climbing up. I think he knows if he did something like that, it could backfire on him in the near future. So I think Calgary's the X factor there. That's going to be an interesting team to watch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Markstrom thing goes back to that why teams are so concerned giving big money to goalies, because they're voodoo. One year they're one of the best goalies in the league, and the next year something doesn't go right, and they're just down the dumps. I mean, that's just the nature of the position. I think it goes back to why teams are afraid to commit big time money to them.
For sure. Well, listen, my man, we're going to wrap it up here, but we appreciate you joining us here, and keep up the great work at LA Hockey Now. Tell all our listeners to check it out. And where can they find you on Twitter?
On Twitter, I'm Stanovich68. So just look me up there, or look up LA Hockey Now. Either one works great.
Great. Sounds good, man. Keep up the good work. We'll talk to you down the line.
Will do. Appreciate it, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on.
All right. That's Austin Stanovich from LA Hockey Now. Join us here on the National Hockey Now podcast. I'm Jimmy Murphy. I'll talk to you next week.